He threw the pen across the mahogany table and laughed in her face. "You are nothing without me, Elena. Just a poor gardener's daughter lucky enough to breathe my air." Marcus Sterling thought he had just secured the deal of a lifetime, divorcing his boring wife to marry his glamorous mistress and save his crumbling business empire. He thought Eleanor was walking away with nothing but the clothes on her back. But he didn't check the one document that mattered more than the divorce papers. He didn't know that the poor gardener she buried last week wasn't just planting flowers. He was planting a legacy. When the judge opened Silas Vance's will, Marcus didn't just lose his composure, he lost his entire world. This is the story of the ultimate regret. The air conditioning in the conference room on the 45th floor of Sterling Enterprises was always set to a chilling 65 degrees. But today, it felt colder than a morgue. Elena Vance sat on the edge of the plush leather chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple grey cardigan, one that had seen better days, and a pair of faded jeans. Across from her sat Marcus Sterling, the man she had loved for 3 years, and the man who was currently looking at her as if she were a stain on his pristine Italian marble floor. "Well," Marcus barked, checking his platinum Rolex for the 3rd time in a minute. "Are you going to sign it, or are you going to sit there counting the dust motes? I have a merger meeting at 2 o'clock, Elena. Real business. Something you wouldn't understand." Standing next to Marcus was Arthur Pendleton, his high-priced corporate attorney. Pendleton slid the thick stack of documents across the table toward Elena. The paper made a harsh scraping sound against the wood. "Mrs. Sterling," Pendleton said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "As discussed, this is a clean break. You receive no alimony, no claim to the Sterling properties in the Hamptons or Aspen, and no stock options. In exchange, Mr. Sterling agrees to absorb the debt accrued on your shared credit cards, which, I might add, is minimal since you rarely spent money." Marcus scoffed, leaning back and putting his feet up on the table. "She didn't spend money because she didn't know how to be a Sterling. I gave her a black card, and she bought groceries at the discount market. It was embarrassing, Arthur. Truly embarrassing." Elena didn't look up. Her eyes were fixed on the bold letters at the top of the page. Decree of dissolution of marriage. "I just want my maiden name back," Elena said softly. Her voice was steady, though her heart was pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Take it!" Marcus laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "Vance! God, it even sounds poor. It smells like fertilizer. How is your father, by the way? Still pruning hedges for the neighbors in Queens?" Elena's hand tightened around the cheap ballpoint pen she had brought from her purse. Marcus didn't know. She hadn't told him. When she had tried to call him last week, sobbing, to tell him that Silas Vance had passed away in his sleep, Marcus had declined the call. He had texted her back. In a meeting. "Stop bothering me." "He's gone, Marcus," Elena whispered, signing her name on the dotted line. Elena Vance? Marcus stopped laughing for a split second, an awkward silence filling the room. Then he shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. "Well, saved me a sympathy card. He was a strange old man anyway, always looking at me with those judging eyes, like he knew something I didn't. Turns out, he knew nothing except how to dig dirt." Elena finished the last signature. She pushed the papers back. She stood up, smoothing down her cardigan. She looked small in the vast, glass-walled office that overlooked the Manhattan skyline, a skyline Marcus claimed he owned. "It's done," she said. Marcus snatched the papers, flipping to the back page to ensure her signature was there. A grin spread across his face, predatory and relieved. "Finally," he breathed out. "Arthur, file these immediately. I want the record to show I am a single man by happy hour, He looked up at Eleanor, his eyes narrowing. You know, I should feel bad. I'm kicking you out onto the street with nothing. But honestly, Eleanor, you were dead weight. You were a passenger in a Ferrari. It's time you learned to take the bus. Elena walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the cold steel handle. She turned back, her brown eyes locking onto his. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't look submissive. She looked pitying. Be careful, Marcus, she said quietly. The view from the top is beautiful, but the fall is fatal. Get out, he sneered. She left. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing her out of his life forever. Or so he thought. 2 hours later, the atmosphere was drastically different. Marcus was seated at the best table in Le Crown, the most exclusive French restaurant in downtown Manhattan. Across from him sat Jessica Thorne. Jessica was everything Eleanor wasn't. She was loud, vibrant, draped in designer silk, and wore diamonds that caught the light of the chandeliers. She was also Marcus's executive assistant, a cliché that Marcus didn't mind one bit. To freedom, Jessica squealed, clinking her champagne flute against his. I can't believe you actually did it. I thought she'd cry. Did she cry? Please tell me she begged. Marcus took a long sip of the vintage Dom Perignon. She didn't say a word. She just signed and left. It was pathetic, really. No fight. No backbone. That's why I had to get rid of her, Jess. Sterling Enterprises is facing a liquidity crisis. We need the merger with the monumental Omni Group, and the CEO of Omni doesn't respect men with simple wives. He wants power couples. You and me, babe, we're the power couple. Jessica preened, running a manicured hand down his arm. And the money? The prenup held? Ironclad, Marcus smirked. She gets nothing. I keep the penthouse, the portfolio, and the company. And more importantly, now that I'm divorced, I can liquidate the old assets without her consent. He lowered his voice, leaning in. The real issue has been the land for the new Sterling mega mall. That project is going to save the company from bankruptcy. We've been trying to buy the plot of land in upstate New York for 5 years. The lease is expiring next week. The owner was some anonymous trust, the Vance Trust, or something generic like that. My lawyers tell me the owner died last week. With the owner dead, the land goes to probate, and I can snatch it up for pennies on the dollar. Jessica giggled. Vance? Wasn't that Elena's last name? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Common name, like Smith or Jones. Elena's father was a nobody, a gardener who lived in a shack. This Vance Trust owns thousands of acres of prime real estate. It's just a coincidence. His phone buzzed on the table. It was Arthur Pendleton. Ignore it, Jessica purred. I can't, it's the lawyer. Maybe the filing is done. Marcus picked up. Arthur, tell me I'm a free man. Arthur's voice on the other end was shaky, unusually shaky. Mr. Sterling, we have a problem. Marcus frowned. What problem? Did she refuse to move out? I'll call security. No, sir. It's not about moving out. I just received a court summons. Delivered by hand, marked urgent. It's from the High Court of Probate. So? Marcus snapped. I told you, I'm trying to buy that land. It's probably about the land deal. It is about the land, Marcus. But the summons requires your presence, and it requires the presence of your ex-wife, Elena Vance, specifically her. Marcus froze. Why the hell do they need Elena? I don't know, sir, but the judge presiding is Judge Harrison. You know him? The hangman Harrison. He doesn't handle small claims. If he's calling us in, it's major. The hearing is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Attendance is mandatory. If you don't show up, you'll be held in contempt and the land deal is dead. Marcus hung up the phone slowly. What's wrong? Jessica asked. seeing the color drain from his face. "I have to see her again," Marcus muttered, staring at his reflection in the silverware. "I have to go to court with Elena tomorrow. Just one last hurdle, Jess. Just one last annoyance before we take over the world." He didn't notice that across the street, standing in the shadows of the bus stop, Elena was watching them through the restaurant window. She wasn't crying. She was holding a letter in her hand, a letter written on thick, cream-colored paper with the seal of the Vance Trust embossed in gold. She turned and boarded the bus, leaving the sight of her husband and his mistress behind. The next morning, the sky over New York was a bruised purple, heavy with rain. The district courthouse was a daunting building of grey stone and pillars designed to make everyone who entered feel small. Marcus strode up the steps, flanking Jessica on one side and Arthur Pendleton on the other. He looked every bit the billionaire tycoon in his charcoal suit, but inside he was agitated. He had meetings to attend, and this detour was costing him money. "Where is she?" Marcus hissed, scanning the hallway outside Courtroom 4B. "She'll be here," Arthur said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She has to be." Just as the clock struck 9, the heavy oak doors swung open, but Eleanor didn't walk in from the hallway. She was already inside. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The courtroom was packed, but it wasn't filled with the usual riffraff of petty crimes. The gallery was seated with men and women in expensive suits, serious people. Marcus recognized a few faces: the CEO of a rival tech firm, the head of a major bank, and several high-profile real estate developers. And there, sitting at the plaintiff's table, was Eleanor. But she wasn't wearing the grey cardigan. She was wearing a black dress, tailored to perfection, simple but undeniably elegant. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was down, cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. She sat with her back straight, her hands clasped on a leather folder. "What is she doing at the plaintiff's table?" Marcus whispered furiously to Arthur. "That's the table for the people suing. We are the ones buying the land." I don't know," Arthur stammered. They took their seats at the defendant's table. Jessica tried to sit next to Marcus, but the bailiff stepped forward. "Ma'am, only parties named in the summons beyond the bar. You'll have to sit in the gallery." Jessica huffed, humiliated, and stomped to the back benches. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice boomed. Judge Harrison entered. He was an older man with eyes like flint and a reputation for destroying careers with a single gavel strike. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked over the rim of them, first at Marcus, then at Eleanor. "We are here today to execute the last will and testament of Silas Vance, and to settle the ownership of the assets held within the Vance Trust," Judge Harrison announced. His voice echoed in the silent room. Marcus leaned over to Arthur. "Why are we reading the gardener's will? Did he leave me a shovel?" He chuckled softly, but Arthur didn't laugh. Arthur was staring at the document the judge had just opened. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his eyes snapping to Marcus, "you seem amused. Perhaps you would like to share the joke." "My apologies, Your Honor," Marcus said, putting on his charming business smile. "I'm just confused. I'm here to bid on a land lease for Sterling Enterprises. I was told the owner of the land had passed. My ex-wife's father was a simple laborer. I believe there's been a clerical error mixing up two different Vances." The courtroom remained deadly silent. The CEO of the bank in the back row coughed awkwardly. Judge Harrison smiled. It was not a nice smile. "A simple laborer," the judge repeated. He looked at Eleanor. "Mrs. Vance, or rather, Ms. Vance, now that the divorce was finalized yesterday. Is that how you described your father to your husband?" Eleanor stood up, Her voice was clear, projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "I never described him as anything, Your Honor." Marcus never asked. He assumed. He saw dirt under my father's fingernails and assumed he was poor. He didn't know that my father liked to work the earth because it was the only thing that kept him grounded after managing a global empire. Marcus blinked. Empire? What is she talking about? Judge Harrison cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Silas Vance, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my entire estate to my only daughter, Elena Vance. This estate includes the holdings of the Vance Trust." The judge paused for dramatic effect. "The assets are as follows: the Vance Agricultural Group, the Midtown Tech Park, the majority shareholder position in Omni Group." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Omni Group? The company he was trying to merge with to save his own skin? "And," the judge continued, "the land currently leased to Sterling Enterprises, located at 550 Fifth Avenue, upon which the Sterling Tower is built." The room spun. Marcus gripped the table. 555th Avenue. That was his headquarters, his flagship building. He didn't own the land. He thought he had a 99-year lease that he was about to renew. "The lease on the Sterling Tower land expired yesterday," the judge read. "According to the terms of the original contract signed 40 years ago, if the lease is not renewed by the owner, the rights to the land, and any structures built upon it, revert to the Vance Trust." The judge looked up. "Mr. Sterling, since the owner, Silas Vance, has passed, the decision to renew your lease now rests with his sole heir." The judge gestured to Eleanor. "Miss Vance, you now own the land under your ex-husband's skyscraper. You also own the debt his company has leveraged against that building. What is your decision regarding the renewal of the lease for Sterling Enterprises?" Marcus turned to Eleanor. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a sheer, cold terror. He looked at the woman he had mocked 24 hours ago, the woman he had called a passenger. He realized with sickening clarity that she hadn't been the passenger. She was the road, and he had just driven off a cliff. The silence in courtroom 4B stretched so thin it felt like it might snap and take someone's head off. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound, echoing like a countdown. Marcus Sterling, a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat, felt a bead of cold sweat trickle down his spine. He looked at the judge, then at the gallery of silent, watching elites, and finally at Eleanor. Eleanor was looking at her fingernails. She seemed bored. "Mr. Sterling?" Judge Harrison prompted, his voice dry. The question was simple. "Ms. Vance holds the deed to the land your headquarters sits on. The lease has expired. She has the right to eviction. Do you have a proposal?" Marcus scrambled to his feet. His knees felt weak. He adjusted his tie, trying to summon the charisma that had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times. "Elena," he started, his voice cracking slightly before he smoothed it out. He turned his body toward her, blocking out the judge, blocking out the lawyers. He flashed the smile that had won her over 3 years ago, the smile that used to make her blush. "Honey, look, this is a lot to process. I didn't know about your father. If I had known, if you had known he was rich, you would have attended the funeral?" Elena interrupted, finally looking up. Her eyes were dry and hard. "Or if you had known he held the deed to your tower, you wouldn't have slept with your secretary?" A gasp rippled through the gallery. Arthur Pendleton buried his face in his hands. "Let's not air dirty laundry in front of these fine people," Marcus said, his smile faltering. "We are family, Elena. We were married for 3 years. Surely we can come to an arrangement. I am willing to offer you a generous renewal rate, 20% above market value for the land lease. That's millions a year, Elena. You'll never have to work again. You can buy all the gardening tools you want. Elena stood up slowly. She picked up the leather folder on her table and opened it. You still don't get it, Marcus. You think this is about money. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. My father didn't buy the land under your building as an investment. He bought it 30 years ago because he knew the Sterling family was ambitious but reckless. He told me once, Elena, a man who builds a tower on rented land is a man who doesn't respect the foundation. He kept the lease active to see if you would ever prove him wrong, to see if you would ever treat me or anyone beneath you with dignity. She walked around the table, her heels clicking on the parquet floor. She stopped just inches from him. You failed the test, Marcus. Every single day for 3 years you failed. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, regarding the lease for the Sterling Tower at 550 Fifth Avenue. Marcus held his breath. Please, he prayed. Please just ask for more money. I decline to renew, Elena said calmly. I am issuing an immediate eviction notice. Sterling Enterprises has 30 days to vacate the premises. Furthermore, as the holder of the debt notes against the structure, I am calling in the loans. Immediate repayment of the $400 million construction bond is required, or ownership of the physical building forfeits to the Vance Trust. You can't do that, Marcus screamed, his facade shattering. 30 days? It's a 40-story skyscraper. We have servers, archives, thousands of employees. And $400 million, we don't have that liquidity. You know we don't. You'll bankrupt me. You bankrupted yourself when you signed those divorce papers yesterday, Elena replied coldly. You wanted a clean break, Marcus? This is it. I'm scrubbing you off my land. I will sue you, Marcus roared, lunging forward, only to be restrained by his own lawyer. I will tie this up in court for decades. You think a gardener's daughter can fight me? I am Marcus Sterling. And I, Elena said, turning her back on him to address the judge, am the majority shareholder of Omni Group. And as of this morning, I have instructed the Omni Board to cease all merger talks with Sterling Enterprises due to unstable leadership. The color drained from Marcus's face completely. The merger was his lifeline. Without the land, without the building, and without the merger, he was nothing. Court is adjourned. Judge Harrison banged the gavel, a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut. The hallway outside the courtroom was chaos. Reporters who had caught wind of the proceedings were swarming. Marcus pushed through the doors, his face a mask of fury, Arthur trailing behind him like a beaten dog. Fix this, Arthur! Marcus yelled, ignoring the flashing cameras. Find a loophole! Claim mental incompetence! Anything! There are no loopholes for this, Marcus, Arthur snapped back, losing his patience. She owns the dirt, you own the air, and she just turned off the gravity. Marcus stopped when he saw Jessica. She was standing near the exit, typing furiously on her phone. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Jessica, Marcus breathed, rushing over to her. Thank God. Listen, we need to go to the Cayman accounts. I have reserves there. If we liquidate the offshore holdings, we can maybe pay the bond, keep the building. Jessica took a step back. She dropped her phone into her designer bag and clicked it shut. We? She asked, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Yes, we. You and me. We're a team, remember? Power couple. Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. Marcus, look at you. You're sweating. Your tie is crooked. And you're technically homeless. It's a temporary setback, Marcus pleaded, reaching for her hand. I'm still a Sterling. You're a liability, Jessica said, her voice loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. And honestly, I never really liked you. I liked the penthouse, I liked the jet. Without those, you're just an insecure man who cheats on his wife because he feels small. Marcus recoiled as if slapped. I left her for you. No, Jessica corrected him, pulling a pair of sunglasses from her purse. You left her for yourself, because she was boring and stable. You wanted a trophy. Well, congratulations, Marcus. You broke the trophy, and now you can't afford the glue. She turned to the revolving doors. Where are you going? Marcus cried out, panic rising in his chest. To dinner, Jessica said over her shoulder. I matched with the CEO of Omni Group on Raya last week. Apparently, he has a very interesting new boss he wants to impress. Maybe I can get a job as Eleanor Vance's assistant. I hear she pays well. She walked out into the rain, leaving Marcus standing alone in the center of the courthouse lobby. The cameras flashed, capturing the precise moment his heart broke. Not for love, but for the realization that he had been played by the very game he thought he invented. A black limousine pulled up to the curb outside. Through the glass doors, Marcus watched as Eleanor walked out. The driver held an umbrella for her. Before she got in, she looked back at the courthouse. Her eyes met Marcus's through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at him with a profound indifference, then disappeared into the car. The 30 days following Judge Harrison's ruling were not a slow decline. They were a free fall without a parachute. For Marcus Sterling, it was a month of public floggings, financial hemorrhaging, and the brutal realization that loyalty in his world was a currency that had just been devalued to zero. It began with the board of directors. 48 hours after the court hearing, Marcus sat at the head of the long obsidian table in the executive boardroom. This room had been his throne room. It was here he had destroyed competitors and fired executives for wearing the wrong color ties. Now the room was silent, save for the hum of the projector. But the chairs around him were empty. The board refused to meet him in person. They were dialed in via video conference, their faces looming on the massive screen on the wall like a panel of executioners. This is a temporary setback, Marcus lied, his voice projecting a confidence he didn't feel. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. I have a line of credit with Deutsche Bank. We can pay the bond Elena is demanding. We simply need to restructure the debt and— Marcus, stop, cut in Charles Whitmore, the chairman of the board. Charles had been Marcus's mentor, the man who taught him how to be ruthless. Now, Charles looked at him with undisguised disgust. There is no we. Deutsche Bank pulled the credit line an hour ago. The news of the eviction is global. Sterling Enterprises stock has dropped 60% since the market opened this morning. You are toxic, Marcus. I built this company, Marcus roared, slamming his fist on the table. You can't push me out. We aren't just pushing you out, a female board member interjected cold. We are erasing you. The board has voted unanimously. You are stripped of your title as CEO, effective immediately. Your access to company accounts is suspended pending a forensic audit. Security has been notified to escort you out once the transition is complete. The screen went black. They didn't even say goodbye. They just disconnected him. Marcus sat in the silence of the empty room, staring at his reflection in the black monitor. He reached for his phone to call Jessica. She had walked out at the courthouse, but surely she would answer now. He needed her. He needed to access the offshore accounts in the Caymans, the rainy day fund he had hidden from the IRS and from Eleanor. He dialed. It went straight to voicemail. He tried to log into the offshore banking app on his phone. Access denied. He frowned and tried again. Access denied. Incorrect password. A text message popped up on his screen. It was from Jessica. Don't bother, sweetie. You used your birthday as the password for the Cayman accounts. Rookie mistake. Consider the funds a severance package for the 3 years I spent listening to you brag about yourself. By the time you read this, the money is in a shell company in Zurich. Good luck with the gardener's daughter. Marcus threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, leaving a spiderweb crack in the expensive plaster. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound of a wolf caught in a trap. The money was gone. The woman was gone. The title was gone. All that was left was the building, and he only had 28 days left inside it. The next few weeks were a spectacle of humiliation. Because Elena had issued a public eviction notice, the move-out process was not private. It was a media event. News vans camped outside 550 Fifth Avenue 24/7. Every time Marcus stepped outside, cameras flashed, capturing his increasing dishevelment. Inside the building, the atmosphere was mutinous. The employees, who had lived in fear of Marcus's temper for years, stopped pretending to work. They openly packed their boxes. They ignored his orders. On day 15, Marcus walked out of the elevator to find his personal assistant, a timid young man named David, shoving the office Keurig machine into a duffel bag. "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus snapped. "That is company property." David stopped. He looked at Marcus, then looked at the machine. He zipped up the bag. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, I bought this with my own money because you said the company budget didn't cover luxury items for staff. Also, I quit. And I'm taking the stapler too." David walked past him, bumping Marcus's shoulder. Marcus stood stunned in the hallway. He realized then that he wasn't just losing a business. He was losing the fear that had insulated him from reality. Without his power, he was just a rude man in a suit that was starting to look a little too big for him. Day 30. The final exit. The deadline arrived with a thunderstorm that battered the glass walls of the penthouse. The electricity had been cut at 8 a.m. sharp. The elevators were locked down. The internet servers were unplugged. The Sterling Empire was now just a dark, hollow shell of steel and concrete. Marcus sat in his office one last time. The movers, hired by the Vance Trust, had cleared everything out. The Eames chair was gone. The mahogany desk was gone. The award display case, filled with CEO of the Year trophies, had been emptied into a dumpster downstairs. He was sitting on a plastic folding chair he had found in a janitor's closet. The silence was heavy, pressing against his eardrums. He looked out at the grey, rain-soaked skyline. He remembered the day he signed the divorce papers right here. He remembered laughing at Elena. He remembered telling her she was nothing. The heavy double doors creaked open. Marcus didn't turn around. "Here to gloat?" he asked, his voice raspy from days of drinking cheap scotch. "I don't have time to gloat, Marcus. I have a building to renovate." The voice was calm, authoritative, and painfully familiar. Marcus turned. Elena stood in the doorway, but she didn't look like the woman he had divorced. She wore a white, hard hat, a high-visibility vest over a tailored pantsuit, and she was holding a roll of blueprints. She was flanked by 2 large security guards wearing uniforms with a green leaf emblem, Vance Trust Security. She walked into the room, her heels clicking on the bare concrete floor where his plush carpet used to be. She looked around the empty space, critically assessing the walls. "We're going to knock this wall down," she said to herself, making a note on the blueprints. "We need more natural light for the hydroponic lab." "Hydroponic lab?" Marcus stood up, his legs stiff. "This is an executive suite, Elena. Presidents have sat in this room. Kings have visited here." "And now," Elena said, finally looking him in the eye, "scientists will sit here. People who actually create things instead of just moving money around. She signaled to the guards, who stepped forward. It's time to go, Marcus. You are trespassing. I have nowhere to go, Marcus whispered. The admission hung in the air, pathetic and small. My accounts are frozen. Jessica took the offshore money. The condo in Aspen was seized this morning. I have nothing. Elena looked at him. Her expression didn't soften, but it didn't hold hate either. It held a profound, crushing indifference. You have your freedom, she said. That's what you wanted, isn't it? You told me you wanted to be a free man by happy hour. Well, you're free. You have no wife to bore you, no business to weigh you down, no employees to annoy you. You finally have exactly what you invested in, yourself. And it turns out that's a very lonely portfolio. Marcus walked toward her, desperation seizing him. Elena, please, we were married. Doesn't that mean anything? Just give me a consulting role. Anything. I know this building. I know the systems. I can help you run this. Elena laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was a genuine chuckle of disbelief. Help me. Marcus, you didn't run this building. You haunted it. You choked the life out of everyone who worked here. Why would I let the infection back into the body? She stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. The lease is up, the debt is called, and the marriage is over. Goodbye, Marcus. The guards grabbed his arms. They weren't gentle. They marched him out of the office, down the hallway, where the shadows of his former logo had been ripped from the wall, and into the freight elevator. The ride down took 45 seconds. 45 seconds to descend from the gods to the gutter. When the doors opened to the lobby, Marcus gasped. In just 30 days, the transformation had already begun. The cold, imposing marble floors were covered in drop cloths. The reception desk, once a fortress of black granite, was being dismantled by workers. In the center of the lobby, where he had placed a golden statue of a bull, there was now a massive, living tree, a weeping fig, being lowered into a planter pit that had been cut into the foundation. The air didn't smell like ozone and stress anymore. It smelled of soil, wet bark, and rain. Elena stepped out of the elevator behind him. She walked over to the construction foreman. Make sure the irrigation system is installed before the atrium glass is replaced, she ordered. Marcus stood by the revolving doors, shivering. He looked at the new sign leaning against the wall, waiting to be hoisted up. It was carved from reclaimed wood, simple and elegant. The Silas Vance Center for Sustainability. He turned to Elena one last time. He was just a gardener, he shouted, his voice cracking. He dug in the dirt. How can you name a skyscraper after a man who dug in the dirt? Elena stopped. She turned slowly, silencing the entire lobby of workers. Because, Marcus, she said, her voice ringing off the high ceilings. He knew that if you want to touch the sky, you have to respect the ground. You tried to build a castle on clouds, and that's why you fell through. She nodded to the guards. Put him out. They shoved him through the revolving doors. Marcus stumbled onto the wet pavement of Fifth Avenue. The rain was torrential now, soaking his expensive suit instantly, ruining the Italian wool. He slipped, falling to his knees in a puddle of dirty city water. A flash of lightning illuminated the street. Pedestrians hurried past him, umbrellas down low, ignoring the man on his knees. A taxi splashed water onto him as it sped by. He reached into his pocket for his wallet. He had $40 in cash and a credit card that had been declined for a coffee that morning. He looked up at the building. His building. Through the glass, he could see Elena. She was laughing with the foreman, pointing at the tree. She looked vibrant. She looked alive. Marcus Sterling, the man who had wanted to own the world, curled into a ball on the sidewalk as the cold rain washed away the last of his dignity. He was finally clean, but he had never felt more filthy. The humidity in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, was nothing like the crisp, conditioned air of a Manhattan penthouse. It was heavy, sticking to the skin like a layer of cheap grease. Marcus Sterling sat on the edge of a motel bed that smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarette smoke. The neon sign outside flickered, the Palms Motor Inn, casting a rhythmic, sickly pink light across his face. He was 42, but he looked 60. His once thick, dark hair was thinning rapidly, revealing a scalp burned red by the relentless Florida sun. His suit, a polyester blend he had bought at a thrift store, hung loosely on his gaunt frame. On the wobbly laminate table in front of him sat a burner phone, a half-empty bottle of lukewarm vodka, and a stack of brochures printed on cheap paper. The brochures read, "Sterling Paradise, secure your retirement in the Everglades." It was a scam. Of course it was a scam. It was swampland. Unbuildable, mosquito-infested swampland that he was selling to retirees as future eco-resorts. It was the only play he had left. After the eviction from Fifth Avenue, Marcus had spiraled. The fraud investigation in New York had stripped him of his remaining liquid assets. Jessica had testified against him to save her own skin, painting him as the mastermind behind financial irregularities he hadn't even known existed. He had avoided prison then by the skin of his teeth and a very expensive plea deal that left him with exactly $0 and a banning order from the New York Stock Exchange. He took a swig of the vodka, grimacing as it burned his throat. His phone buzzed. It was a potential client, an elderly widow named Mrs. Gable. She was his mark for the week. If he could get her $50,000 deposit, he could pay off the loan shark who had been banging on his motel door for 3 nights straight. But he didn't answer. Instead, his eyes drifted to the small television bolted to the corner of the room. The evening news was playing. And in business news tonight, a record-breaking quarter for the Omnivance Group. The conglomerate, led by CEO Elena Vance, has just unveiled its new global headquarters in London. But closer to home, the former Sterling Tower, now the Silas Vance Centre for Sustainability, is celebrating its 5th anniversary with a gala tonight. Our correspondent is live on Fifth Avenue. Marcus froze. He scrambled for the remote, turning the volume up until the speakers rattled. There it was. His building. But it didn't look like his building anymore. The cold steel and glass facade he had been so proud of was now intertwined with vertical gardens, cascading greenery that turned the skyscraper into a living, breathing pillar of nature in the middle of the concrete jungle. It was beautiful. It was mocked by critics when she first proposed it, calling it the Jungle Tower. But now, it was the most coveted real estate in the city. And there she was. Elena. She was stepping out of a sleek electric limousine. She wore a gown of deep emerald green that shimmered under the camera flashes. She looked radiant, powerful, but not the jagged, fearful power Marcus had wielded. She possessed a calm, magnetic strength. A reporter thrust a microphone in her face. "Miss Vance! Miss Vance! The company's stock is up 200% this year. Your initiative to provide microloans to farmers is changing the global market. What is your secret?" Elena stopped. She smiled, and even through the grainy motel TV screen, Marcus felt the warmth of it. "I learned from the best," Elena said, her voice clear. "My father taught me that you don't force things to grow. You nourish the soil, you remove the weeds, and you have patience. A business is like a garden. If you poison the ground to get a quick harvest, you starve in the winter. We focus on the ground. Remove the weeds," Marcus whispered, repeating her words. The bitterness rose in his throat like bile. "I was the weed. He hurled the vodka bottle at the TV. It shattered the screen, sparks flying as the image of Eleanor Vance distorted and died. He sat in the darkness, breathing heavily. The silence of the room was deafening. He looked at the brochures for the swamp land. Sterling Paradise. It was pathetic. He was pathetic. He grabbed the burner phone. His fingers trembled as he punched in a number he hadn't called in 5 years. He knew she wouldn't answer. She probably had a new number. But he had to try. He had to hear her voice. He had to scream at her, beg her, blame her. He didn't know which. The line rang, and rang, and rang. Then, a click. Vance Executive Office. How may I direct your call? A crisp, professional voice. I need to speak to Elena, Marcus rasped. May I ask who is calling? Tell her it's Marcus. Tell her I'm ready to negotiate. It was a delusion, and he knew it. There was nothing to negotiate. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, the assistant's voice returned, colder this time. Mr. Sterling, we have a flagged protocol for this number. Ms. Vance has no interest in speaking with you. Furthermore, legal counsel advises you that violating the restraining order regarding harassment will result in immediate action. Do not call this line again. Click. She hadn't even changed her number protocols. She had just programmed him out of her existence. He wasn't an enemy to be fought. He was a spam call to be blocked. A heavy pounding on the motel door made him jump. Sterling, open up! It wasn't the lone shark. The voice was authoritative. Police! Marcus scrambled back against the headboard. I didn't do anything! The door splintered inward with a crash. 3 officers in tactical vests stormed the small room, guns drawn. Behind them walked a man in a cheap suit, Detective Miller from the Fraud Division. Marcus Sterling, Miller said, stepping over the broken glass and spilled vodka. You are under arrest for wire fraud, elder abuse, and selling unlicensed real estate. Mrs. Gable's son called us. Seems you tried to sell a grandmother a plot of land that is currently underwater and federally protected. One of the officers grabbed Marcus, hauling him off the bed. He didn't fight. He didn't have the energy. As they slapped the cuffs on his wrists, the cold metal bit into his skin. You're making a mistake, Marcus whined, the same old refrain. I'm a businessman. I built the Sterling Tower. Detective Miller laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Buddy, you didn't build anything. You leased it. And now your lease on freedom is up. They dragged him out into the humid Florida night. The neighbors, prostitutes, drug dealers, and drifters watched from their doorways with indifferent eyes. As Marcus was shoved into the back of the squad car, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. He saw a man who had spent his life trying to be a king, only to realize he was just the jester in a tragedy he wrote himself. Meanwhile, 200 miles north, the gala was winding down, but the energy in the grand hall of the Silas Vance Center was electric. The air smelled of fresh orchids and expensive champagne. Elena escaped the crowd, slipping through a side door that led to the private rooftop garden. This was her sanctuary. Unlike the sterile helipad Marcus had installed here, Elena had converted the roof into a functioning greenhouse and observatory. She walked over to the railing, looking out over the glittering expanse of Manhattan. From here, the city looked like a sea of diamonds. Hiding? A voice asked softly. Elena turned. Julian was standing in the doorway, holding 2 flutes of sparkling cider. He had loosened his tie, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Julian was the head architect for the Foundation's housing projects, but to Eleanor, he was the man who listened when she spoke and held her when she cried. He was the anti-Marcus. Just breathing, Eleanor said, taking the glass he offered. It gets loud down there. Everyone wants a piece of the success. They want to be near the light, Julian said, stepping up beside her. You shine bright, Elle. Elena looked down at the glass in her hand. I saw the news earlier, about the fraud arrest in Florida. They didn't name him on the broadcast I saw, but I knew. Julian was silent for a moment. He knew the history. He knew the scars. Does it hurt? No, Elena said, surprised by the truth of her own answer. It doesn't hurt. It just feels inevitable. Marcus spent his whole life trying to build castles in the sky. He never looked down to see where he was standing. I feel pity for him, Julian. He had everything, and he threw it away because he thought everything wasn't enough. She turned back to the skyline. My father used to say that greed is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you'll get. Marcus drowned a long time ago. Well, Julian said, wrapping an arm around her waist. The past is down there in the dark. What about the future? Eleanor smiled. The future is waking up early tomorrow. Oh? We're going upstate. The harvest isn't done. The apples are ready, and I promised Silas Jr. he could drive the tractor. With supervision, of course. Julian laughed. He's 3, Elena. His feet don't reach the pedals. He's a Vance, she teased. He'll figure it out. We're good with dirt. The next morning, the sun rose over the Vance estate in upstate New York, bathing the rolling hills in a light that felt holy. The estate had changed since her father's days. It was no longer just a home. It was a working farm and an educational center for sustainable living. But the heart of it, the old apple orchard, remained untouched. Elena walked through the rows of trees, her boots crunching on the fallen autumn leaves. The air was sharp and cold, filling her lungs with clarity. She reached the small family cemetery at the edge of the property. It was enclosed by a low stone wall that her great-grandfather had built. There were 3 stones now. Her mother's, her father's, and a small empty space beside them where she would one day rest. She knelt before Silas Vance's grave. The granite was cool to the touch. She placed a single, perfect red apple from the morning's harvest on top of the headstone. We did it, Dad, she whispered. The wind rustled the branches above her, a sound that sounded remarkably like a sigh of relief. I didn't just keep the land, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. I healed it. The company isn't a weapon anymore. It's a tool. We're building schools where Marcus wanted to build casinos. We're planting forests where he wanted to strip mine. She paused, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. You warned me about him. You told me that a man who mocks the waiter will eventually starve. I didn't listen then because I was in love with the idea of him. But I learned that love isn't grand gestures and diamond rings. Love is showing up. Love is weeding the garden when it's raining. Love is steady. She heard a shout of joy from the hill behind her. Mama! Mama, look! Elena turned. Her son, Silas, was running down the hill, his cheeks flushed red from the cold, clutching a giant pumpkin with both hands. Julian was jogging behind him, laughing, trying to keep the boy from tripping. I found the biggest one, little Silas yelled. Grandpa's pumpkin! Elena watched them, her real legacy. It wasn't the skyscrapers. It wasn't the billions in the bank. It was this moment of pure, unadulterated joy rooted in the simple act of living. She looked back at the grave one last time. He signed the papers mocking me, Dad, she said, a fierce pride rising in her chest. He thought he was burying me. He didn't know I was a seed. Elena stood up, brushing the dirt from her jeans. The the same way she had done in that boardroom 5 years ago. But this time, she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward everything. She ran to catch her son, scooping him up into her arms, spinning him around until the world was nothing but a blur of blue sky and golden leaves. Far away, in a concrete cell in Florida, Marcus Sterling sat alone, staring at a blank wall, wondering where it all went wrong. But here, in the orchard, the roots ran deep, and the harvest was just beginning. And that is how the gardener's daughter proved that the tallest towers fall the hardest, while the deepest roots survive the storm. Marcus chased the view from the top and ended up with nothing but a view of prison bars. Elena embraced the dirt and built a world of abundance. It's a powerful reminder. Be careful who you step on today. They might be the ones owning the ground you walk on tomorrow. If this story satisfied your justice craving, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm share this karma with the world. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus deserved a second chance, or was his fate exactly what he earned? I'll be reading your replies. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.